Hello, everybody. Welcome to FARSIGHT'S Spotlight. This is the first week of Spotlight in June 2025. Time flies. And about those of you who are thinking about my do-rag, wearing that, I just got off of the motorcycle. I was on a drive this afternoon, and here I am. So I didn't have a chance to really change anything. So today's talk is going to be really interesting, and it's apparently a little bit appropriate for having just come off a motorcycle ride. So let's actually talk about this. This talk is for men as well as women. Both sides need to understand this. And I need to explain why this is related to disclosure and the extraterrestrial stuff that's going on the planet right now, as well as the wars that are going on the planet and the expanded wars that are about to burst out all over the planet like soon. The fate of men in the world. We're going to start out, we're going to hit it from that angle. And again, this is for both men and women, but I'm going to be hitting it mostly from the men's side so you can understand from one side, and then I will try to address some of the issues relating to women in a little while in this broadcast, as well as in future broadcasts. But this one's more tilted directly towards the men, both to help explain to men what's happening and to explain to women what's happening to their men. Okay. So to start, let me just say that there is currently a war going on. It's a Cold War. And it's a war between men and women. It's a war between the genders. And it's not just in the United States. You'll find it similarly in other countries. And this gender war is raging. And so let's talk a little bit about the reasons why this gender war is raging and why it affects men in a certain way, and then we'll get to women in a little bit, and why this is related to the extraterrestrials. That's the real key. Okay, first of all, let's describe the war and its basic elements. So let's talk about it from the men's point of view, which is what is happening to men. So men are increasingly becoming disengaged with women. They're becoming disengaged with interacting. So there's two types of things going on. There's both psychological and there's physical stuff going on. And you have to understand it, and then we will connect it to the extraterrestrial thing in just a little bit. So just hold on. Hold your horses, okay? Give me a chance to explain myself. Psychological. In the Western world today, men's assertiveness, especially sexual assertiveness, is seen as toxic in the world. It's seen as a bad thing. People are taught, young men in school, and and young people, they're taught basically that they're bad for being men, and it's not good. The crisis that young men are facing is enormous. Now the numbers are stunning on this. The survey numbers, the scientific numbers with regard to men and the young men and their self-esteem is just plummeting. They don't do very well in school. If you look at colleges, the vast majority of people who successfully enter colleges are women, not men. The majority of college students in almost every university is women, and women get better test scores, they get better grades. They just do better academically. And so you can sort of say, what's going on with the men? Well, it turns out that the men are in a real deep funk. They're in a real deep self-reflective crisis right now. And the numbers are striking. And don't think for a second that this just affects men. Women don't want a world without assertive men, without men that can't, hold their own. So this is something that's really deeply affecting. Now, men in general are taught that their tendency to want to connect sexually with women is a hostile act against the women. So what that results in is that men are retreating. Marriages are failing at an enormous rate. 53% or up of marriages simply end in divorce court. The result is that men are simply not dating anymore. It's not that they're failing in their relationships. They're not having relationships. So women, if you do sort of casual searches on dating and relationships on the YouTube, for example, you'll see it's filled, I mean absolutely filled with women complaining that what's wrong with the men? The men have gone away. They're not even interested anymore. And you'll see a lot of men saying that they want to go somewhere else to try to find, the love of their life, perhaps in Asia or something else, because they're failing here and in the Western world. So the result is that men are simply not dating, not interacting, and they're not marrying. This is an absolute crisis, a total crisis in Japan, South Korea, Italy, and now the United States is not far behind. Japan is going to just simply disappear. You see, I'm giving you a special piece of scientific knowledge I've gotten through my special research. I have determined that only women have babies. Yes, I figured that out. So, okay, it's a bad joke, but the point is that if women are not having children anymore, and you get a group of about 20 years where women are not having children, the game's over, because then there's not enough young women anymore to have children. The young women are the ones who are going to be having children. So once you go through a period of 10 or 20 years where women sort of slow down and don't have children, it's over. Well, Japan, South Korea, Italy have gone way past that. It's really it's a very, very serious problem. So, and again, the U.S. is not far behind. So women are sort of giving up on men, and men are retreating away. It's not that they're giving up on women. They're not even trying anymore to sort of do this. And you can say, well, how is this affecting extraterrestrials? What in the world does this have to do with remote viewing and extraterrestrials? Okay, now give me a little bit of a chance. Part of the element is not just psychological. Part of it is also physical. The environment has changed. The food, the additives, the things that people are consuming, it's not right. And I'm going to use one example here because I just have one example, but I could pull out many, but I just don't want to occupy a lot of time with this. Testosterone levels. That's one thing that drives men to want to have contact with women. They're dropping. They're plummeting. They're like, what? They're gone. They're going away. So I've got some some numbers here to show you, and this is from the Urology Times, in volume 58. It's a recent volume, and issue number 7, and this is a quote. After controlling for co-founders, including year of study, age, race, body mass index, BMI, comorbidity status, alcohol and smoking use, and the level of physical activity, total testosterone was lower among men in the later 2011 to 2016 versus the earlier periods from 1999 to 2000. So if you compare before 2000, like in the 1980s, there's a huge difference, even more. But just going from 2000 to around 2016, what's happened just in that period of time, to show you how short a period of time that was. The mean testosterone level decreased from the year 2000, this is the average testosterone level, from 605 to going to 2003, 3 years later, to 567. To 2011, that would be 8 years later, 424. And then going 2 or 3 years later, 2014, 431. So if you go then to the most recent that they had in this study, 2016, 451. So you're going from the year 2000 to testosterone levels averaging around 605 to 2016, which is 451. Now the average is less now because now it's 2025. So I didn't bring up the numbers for 2024 and 2025, but it's less still. And if you go back to 1990, for example, or 1980, for example, the testosterone levels were way higher. So if men have a lot of testosterone, they really are interested in women. I'll give you a good example. When people have hair transplants, they often have to take a drug called fisteroids. And what happens is it's a testosterone blocker, because when they get transplants, they take hair from the back of the head and they plant it like a tree on the top of the head. But then it doesn't look good because there's not a lot of small bushes around, like a forest has both big trees and small bushes. So the small hairs have to come back. So they give a testosterone blocker. And the hairs on the top of the head for men are basically killed off by testosterone. Testosterone is the enemy of hairs on the top of the head for men. And there was one guy, an interesting fellow. He just wanted to attract more women. He was bald on the top of his head, and he wanted to have more girls that he could date. And so he got a hair transplant, and they gave him this finasteride drug, which blocked the testosterone, and it worked. I mean, his hair was gorgeous, and it worked to attract women. Women really attracted him and liked him. And then he discovered that when he got into bed with a naked woman, he felt disgusted. I mean, it worked all right, but his testosterone level was dropped down, and he no longer was attracted to women anymore. So, what was the purpose of having the hair transplant? So he got his hair back, but he didn't like women anymore. He became non-sexual. So, the testosterone level really does affect the assertiveness level of men. So, testosterone levels have had a steep and steady decrease among young men. Among all men, not young men. And as a result, male assertiveness is declining. Now, I'm going to connect this to the extraterrestrials, so just hold on. And what's happened is men are retreating into video games, and they're simply not interacting with women. So the environment also surrounding them is terrible. Divorces are skyrocketing. And most divorces are initiated by women, so it's a hostile situation to get married. And then you have situations where sexual happiness is usually not something that men get in marriage. So you see, men get married because they are desiring regular sex. That is the primary reason men get married. But men almost universally complain that after marriage, a few years after marriage, sex simply stops. And wives become, and this is the words of men, and hold off, I'm not trying to insult any women now, I'm just telling you how men describe things. I've heard it that countless times. Men describe these women who get married as turning into fat and ugly. They're no longer attracted to them anymore. Now, the parallel thing is, from the men's point of view, the men are not looking at a mirror. You see, those very same men who are complaining about their wives being fat and ugly, those same men are typically extremely obese, fat, and completely out of shape. Meaning, they don't look sexually attractive in the slightest. So what you get is both sides of the coin are simply not talking to each other, not understanding each other. They're complaining about each other. They're at war with each other. They're cold war with each other. But neither side is right and neither side is wrong. They both have the exact same problems. So the one thing that I'm sort of focusing on here to connect it to the extraterrestrial thing is that men's sex drive is declining. Now here's some factors. This will help connect it to the larger thing of disclosure and the AT community and so on. Diet. The diet is simply terrible. People eat processed foods, and the studies are now coming in like roller coasters, just one after the next after the next. The people that eat processed foods get cancer, they get all types of health issues. They are not eating real food, like made out of real grains and real things. And they have done studies and they found that it doesn't matter what diet you have, whether it's a Mediterranean diet, a vegetarian diet, or this diet, or that diet, or whatever. The real kicker is it a real foods diet? And real foods is not what people eat. If you go to the main grocery stores these days, the whole grocery stores are filled with processed foods, and they have stuff in them. Just look at the ingredients of anything. You don't understand any of the ingredients of any of that stuff. That stuff is not supposed to be eaten by human beings. And what results is all types of stuff happens. A lot of those chemicals and things like that have an effect on one's psychological well-being as well as one's health, and so people end up dying. Then you look at, now by the way, I must say I am not a medical doctor, so I'm giving my opinion about these things, but you should not take my advice as medical advice, because I am just talking from my own personal observations, but I am not a medical doctor, and so you must rely on your own judgments and talk to your own personal physician to find out if any of this stuff that I'm talking about is worthwhile, okay? That's a strong caveat. Calorie intake. It's well known that for people who grow fat, they have a lower sex drive. The calorie intake is just enormous. Just the amount of fat that people eat in their diets doesn't even come close to what used to happen in the old days, like 100 years ago or 70 years ago. The types of foods that they have is tremendously increase in sugars and fat content. It's just simply not healthy. And then you have advertising as well. Advertising pumps these foods that are toxic at people all the time, and people are influenced by the advertising. Now again, this is the problem of processed foods, not regular whole foods. But the connection to the extraterrestrial type of stuff is coming, so I just have to make the case for it first. So what basically has happened is people have become desensitized to self-reflection, being able to look at oneself and say, hey, what is really going on? Do men stay in frame? Do they know who they are? Do they stay in frame, and do they stay as alpha males as compared to beta males who sort of go along with the flow and sort of begging for sex and then become, mats on the floor for women to walk over, not because the women are doing anything wrong, but the men aren't being assertive. They're not being alpha males. They're not stating who they are and what they're doing. And there's a huge difference between an alpha male who stays in frame and says who he is, and then lets the woman decide whether she likes that or not, and a male who's being aggressive and abusive. So I'm not at all talking about a male who's trying to control a woman in an aggressive or abusive way. I'm talking about a male who simply says, this is who I am, and perhaps you like that, and if you don't, I wish you well, and that's good. A lot of women really like that if a man actually stays in frame, then they know whether that person is going to be something that is going to achieve something in life. All right. And then there's the environmental factors on food as well. And finally, I have to address the issue of drugs. Drugs are everywhere in our society, and it goes from alcohol to marijuana to everything else. And the leadership of our society is filled with cocaine use, and this is talking Europe as well as the United States, cocaine use, marijuana use, and stuff like that. So marijuana is enormously potent. It's not at all what it was like in the 1970s or 60s. And it's a train wreck inside the brain. And enough studies are now in that approximately 18% or higher people who regularly smoke marijuana end up in mental hospitals and are diagnosed as bipolar or schizophrenic. Google it. You find out for sure. Don't take my word on anything I'm saying today. Drugs are really messing up people's minds. And, it's just not just something that's recreational, something you can chill with. The memory is damaged, and your assertiveness is damaged. And at night, instead of wanting to rebel against the stuff that's happening in the society, you smoke a blunt and you chill off. So drugs is an amazing effect. And they did a test on the water in the Thames River in London, and they found that the amount of Prozac that was in the water was enormous. That means people were taking Prozac like it was gangbusters, and then they were peeing it out, and it was in the river. It was like not a small amount. Just, it was enormous. This is Prozac in the river, just from people being it out. So the result is male assertiveness is dying, and possibly the possibility of rebellion of what's going on in the world today is declining also. The prison population on this planet, which is everybody on the planet, is contained. Now let me give you a little bit of it. I'm going to divert now a little bit and talk about the connections between these gender things, the male things that I was talking about, and the extraterrestrial things. But before I do that, I want to use myself as a control that you can just sort of see as a control. Forever, ever since processed foods became a thing, I have not eaten processed foods. And I don't eat sugar, I don't eat salt, I don't eat processed foods. I eat basically whole foods, and I've been drinking filtered water for as long as I can remember. So we're just going back for a long time. So I'm using myself as an example because there was one thing that I was doing. I was eating a lot of yogurt, and that's dairy. So I had my total testosterone tested in December of 2024. And in December of 2024, this is interesting. So in a situation where, using myself as sort of a lab rat, in a situation where someone avoided all of the environmental pesticide use, organic foods for everything, that type of thing, what would happen? So I said, let me just test and see. So did my testosterone level differ from the average for men? And I'm 72 years old, and I do what's called severe caloric restriction with super supplementation of vitamins and minerals, but I have no testosterone replacement therapy. I don't take extra testosterone or any type of hormone for anything. Okay, so in mid-December, and the reason I do the severe caloric restriction and super supplementation is it cuts the aging rate in half, according to studies with rats and mice and snakes and spiders and things like that. And I get myself checked with the doctor literally every year, a couple times a year. My doctor, who is skeptical about this, he's a really good doctor at Emory, but my doctor who has been skeptical about this, he just looked at me the other day and said, looks like it's working, because he's seen me for like decades, and he's seen all of my stuff. I take no medication at all. My blood pressure is 116 over 60 or something like that. And he gets he tests everything on me and on my request. And so they've been monitoring it. My file at Emory is huge. It's huge in the Emory healthcare system. Anyway, so I had my total testosterone checked, and in December of 2024, and then again, I was just wondering if someone does what I do. I'm not saying I'm different than anybody else, but if someone does what I do, what happens? And it was 787. Now, the range for men between 19 and 39 years old, which is a normal ages for having babies and things like that, is 264 to 916. So 787 was very close to the absolute max for men in that age group, and yet I'm 72. Now, starting at the age of 40, testosterone level goes down 1% a year. So for someone 72, the normal testosterone level is 300. So here I am at 787. However, I was curious what would happen if I cut out all dairy. Now, the reason dairy is an issue is it's got tons of estrogen, because those are lactating female cows that are producing the yogurt. And I didn't drink other dairy, but I had a lot of yogurt. It was non-fat yogurt, and the estrogen is normally in the fat, so it was a minimal amount of estrogen in the non-fat yogurt, but I had a lot of it. So I said, what happens if I just cut that out? What happens to the testosterone level? So I was thinking it might have a little bit of an impact, okay? Well, I had it checked again, right, the total testosterone, and it was in May 6th, just like, well, here is June 1st, so it's like 3 weeks ago. And it was 979. So that's close to 1,000. Now, the normal range for someone 19 to 39 is 264 to 916. So 979 is way above the normal range for somebody who's like 19 to 39, 19 to 40. So like, what? It's like, so it had an effect. It went up, what was it? It went up 200 points. Yeah, it went up 200 points just by eliminating the estrogen that I was getting. Estrogen is a testosterone binding hormone. So that gives you an idea of how sensitive the body is to things that you eat. So, and again, I'm not a medical doctor. I'm just giving my opinion, so don't take anything I'm saying as absolute truth or anything like that. Always go to your doctor to find out what's good for you. I'm just telling you my side of things, what I've been doing. But it gives you an idea. The only thing I changed was eating yogurt. I stopped eating yogurt, and you saw how much the testosterone level changed. So if you include the other things, like whole foods and instead of processed foods and other things like that, I couldn't change those because I never ate the processed foods. So, but if you do that, then it has a big difference, because you can see changing just one item that I was eating had a 200-point difference in testosterone. You know, anyone 72 years old should have a testosterone level around 300, but 1,000 is like crazy. So, but that's what should normally happen if you don't have all of these processed foods and other types of chemicals and additives in the diet that are screwing things up, in my humble opinion. And again, I'm not a medical doctor. I'm just saying that this is my personal theory of what's going on, but I've been looking at this for a while. So how does this connect with the extraterrestrial thing? And how does this connect with world events? And how does this connect to the gender war? Well, in historical times, men are often the ones that initiate and fight battles. If you look at across time, it's almost always the men who die in the battles. They go out and they fight for the good cause of whatever it is. And if you're going to try to domesticate or quiet down and keep in a population sedated, you're going to want to cover all things. Well, one of the things you're going to want to do is get the aggressiveness out of men, because if you're going to have a rebellion, that's where it's likely going to come out from. So the differences between genders also parallels the differences that you have, the crises that you have with war. So think of the crises that you're having with women and men not as a problem with men or a problem with women. Think of it as polarization. The two sides are polarized, and you shouldn't be asking what's wrong with men or what's wrong with women. You should be asking, why are the two sides opposed to each other? Why is it not working? I mean, since the beginning of time, men and women have gotten along and they had civilization. So what is the war all about? And you have to say, well, is it an accident that this war, Cold War between men and women, is going on at the same time that you have these other wars going on that are going into biblical proportions? I don't know if you're looking at the right news sources, but this stuff is not being covered in the news. For example, the cartels have really gone wacky beyond all belief. And you have to, and this is not being covered in the major news, but in some outlets that are offbeat, they just discovered mass graves of over 7,500 people in Tijuana. Mass graves. They needed these big bulldozer type things to dig out all the skeletons. 7,500 of mass graves in Tijuana done by the cartels. I mean, it's like, and you're not getting that in the news. It's simply not being covered. You're not getting it in the news either that the Ukrainian military has been attacking the nuclear facilities and the nuclear bombers of Russia, and very effectively. And Russia is starting to directly threaten Europe. And Ukraine has been given permission by the Western powers, the NATO powers, to use their missiles to fire deep into Russia. What it really looks like is that Ukraine war is going to spill out into the rest of Europe in short order. That's what it really looks like. And then when you look at what's happening between Israel and Iran and the United States, the United States has given Iran an ultimatum to stop producing enriched uranium. Iran is simply refusing. They have a lot of uranium that is enriched over 60%. And it takes about 2 weeks to make bomb-grade material from the uranium they have. And they have increased their production of enriched uranium to the point where they should be able to get enough enriched uranium to have a bomb, one bomb every 2 weeks. And they've done that now. And they're saying flat blank they're not going to stop. So it really looks like Israel is going to attack the nuclear facilities in Iran, and it looks like the United States very well may participate in that. But whatever is going to happen, it looks like something's going to blow up. Now, is Iran just going to take it on the chin and say, "Oh, shucks, you got us. Ha ha, you blew up the facilities. That was a good try"? No, they're going to respond. So how are they going to respond? It's now known among intelligence people, and you can actually see this on things like the Sean Ryan podcast, that Al-Qaeda and Iran during the Biden and Harris administrations put in a few thousand operatives each into the United States together with weapons. Now, these aren't small arms. You're talking about missiles, major weapons that they brought in. I mean, if you can bring in 18-wheelers filled with drugs, you could bring in 18-wheelers filled with weapons. And now they have a few thousand each, Al-Qaeda as well as Iran, operatives in sort of sleep mode in the United States, and they could launch attacks within the United States. Again, I'm getting this from the Sean Ryan podcast, from people in the intelligence community that talk on that, and it seems very convincing that if Israel and the United States attack Iran, Iran's not going to just say, "Oh well, gosh, it was good while it lasted. Okay, we'll go back to making, what are we going to do now? Okay, we'll make pizzas instead." They're not going to do that. They're going to respond in some way. So it looks like the war in Ukraine is going to spill out into Western Europe big time, meaning I'm expecting it's likely at this time, talking probabilistically, that Russia will start launching missiles into Western Europe. And it seems very likely that the United States and Israel are going to attack Iran, and Iran is going to find some means to reciprocate. So we're talking about some type of version of World War III. So you should be asking, is all of this like planned? Why are all of these crises coming out at the same time? And why are men not sort of seeing what's going on and rebelling? Why aren't they leading the rebellion? And so that's the type of problems we're dealing with. A mass situation of tremendous drug use in the United States. The cartels are pumping in drugs like crazy in the United States, and that's where that 7,500 plus people died and their graves are being dug up. Actually, it's one solid grave. People are just being dug up with like these steam shovels. So these types of things indicate that the amount of damage that's been done in the United States, for example, is just enormous, and they are not going to just give up. There's going to be conflicts that result in this. And if you want to maintain the prison population, you can't have a bunch of people that are uppity, that are going to fight. And so the male population in particular has to be essentially castrated, has to be demasculinized, or has to be taken to the point where the chance of rebellion is reduced. So you get both a combination of false narratives being put into the UFO community, but you also have a situation where the lies are not just the only thing that's going on, but you have the situation where the people who are receiving those lies don't fight back and say, "That's crazy, that's ridiculous," and throw it away. They accept it. So we have a situation in which we have a sheep mentality in the world. And this is not just the United States. This is Japan, Korea, Asia, the United States, Europe. Among men especially, there's a sheep mentality where they follow the leaders, and women are affected by this as well, follow the leaders. Now, in terms of the hormonal imbalances, women, the situation. The times when you actually start having your periods is not what it's supposed to be. Young girls are having their periods at crazy early ages. they shouldn't be having that till like in their mid-teens, but they're having their periods like when they're 8, 10, 12 years old, or earlier sometimes. And, don't take my word for it. Just Google it. It's a mass phenomenon. So something is happening in the environment that you're eating. Something is happening that is changing the way your bodies are reacting, and it's affecting men as well as women. The more hormones from phthalates, pesticides, from herbicides and fertilizers, especially phthalates, that get consumed by people, they affect the hormonal levels, and that's affecting all of this together. So basically what we have is a situation in which the bad ETs, that we call the bad ETs, want a prison population that they can control. They don't give a damn about your physical bodies. They care about your Isbes. The 8 billion population on the planet Earth has 8 billion Isbes. Isbes are immortal spiritual beings, or those people, a being who is simply for the purpose of being. That's your soul, spirit, whatever you want to call it, but we call it Isbes. Those Isbes can be put into all types of bodies, and if you have a fascist, totalitarian, authoritarian ET population that needs to keep those Isbes here, then they can use those Isbes as soldiers, as warriors, as prostitutes to service those warriors, as traders. You need billions of them. And now you have 8 billion on the planet that are in bodies, and how many billions outside waiting in the wings? Those Isbes are needed in order to have any type of expansion. And if you look at any type of totalitarian society that we have had on Earth, the Nazis, or any type of fascist organizations, they always want to expand. Well, the bad ETs are like that. They need to expand. So they want you, the people, not just the physical body. They don't give a hoot about the physical bodies. They want to keep you sedated. And the sex components, the gender components, the hormonal components, in my view, parallel the problems that you're having in the world. Because what you have is a situation in which, on one side, the assertiveness of people is being driven down chemically and hormonally and so on like that. But at the same time, you have crises that are coming out all over the world. So people are either in crises, totally confused by crises, they don't know what they are one way or the other, or they're confused about their own personal crises. So now we have crises where men and women are opposed to each other and in a Cold War type of situation. So even if you're not living in Europe and you're not living in the Middle East, you still have crises, polarization crises happening right here. And that keeps everybody offset. And that helps it so that no one asks the serious questions of who's doing all this. Is it just by accident? Is it because men are sort of dorks? That's why they're doing all of this and women have a right to complain? Or is it that women are doing something and men have a right to complain? Or is it that the Israelis are doing something and so the non-Israelis have a right to complain? Or the non-Israelis are doing something and the Israelis have a right to complain? Or the Russians are doing something and the Ukrainians have a right to complain? Or the Ukrainians are doing something and the Russians have a right to complain? Like, you get these polarized opposites all over the place. And politically in the United States, we're in a situation where very seriously over the next 10 years, the United States could possibly fragment because the polarization in the United States is so severe. Like, what? Why is this all happening? The point is that as long as you're distracted by these crises, and as long as you no longer are, for the men's side, alpha males that know their frame and are willing to stand up for things, you have a prison population that become contained, and they don't care about your physical body. That's where all these hormones and processed foods and everything affect that. They don't care about that. What they want is your Isbe, and they just want you to hang around long enough in that body so they can get to the time where they can start utilizing all these Isbes, these people, in the galactic expansion that would eventually cause, one of the worst galactic holocausts, probably. I don't know, in a whole section of the universe, I suppose. It's terrible. So anyway, that's what I wanted to raise to you today. I didn't want to tell you that this is just all facts, but I wanted to bring facts to you and say, would you like to consider this? And I would like to know, what are your thoughts about this? Does this match with your own thoughts, with your own experiences? I'd really like you to read and to write your comments either below the video in the comments on YouTube or especially on FARSIGHTPrime.com in the forums section. So if these comments resonate with you in some way, either for or against, I'd like to hear what you have to say. We'd all at Farsight like to hear what you have to say, because we're fighting for a battle for the survival of humanity. And if we don't look in the mirror and see what's happening to us personally, how in the world can we affect the entire planet in a way to survive? We have to be self-reflective more than anything else. So here, what do I have here? You see? A mirror. We need to be able to look at the mirror and see ourselves, not just physically, but psychologically. And then look at all the crises and say, this can't be just an accident. They must be all related. If men and women are at war with each other, and the Ukrainians and Russians, and then maybe the Russians and Europe, and then the Middle East, if everybody's blowing apart, if everyone's fighting at the same time, can it just be a coincidence? Anyway, I'd like to hear your thoughts. What is your experience, and what are your thoughts about this? And put your comments in the forums at farsightprime.com or below the video in the comment section. Again, this video will be coming down as a live stream and being edited and put it back up later on tonight as a regular video. So if you're watching it as a live stream, as a live thing, don't be upset if it gets taken down a little. When it gets taken down, we immediately are putting it back up, the edited version, which has great audio, nicely edited and stuff like that. Anyway, let's see what the time is. 7:49, so we've been going for about 45 minutes, so this is great. That's what I wanted to talk to you about today, something to have some thoughts about. And I will see you all. Oh, but the reason there was no spotlight last weekend is because it was Memorial Weekend. On the United States, it was a holiday, and basically everybody was off doing something else, so that's why there was no spotlight. And next spotlight is we have Ask Me Anything, questions and answers. So if you can write your questions in the forums and the post that's for the Ask Me Anything post, I will answer all of your questions, or most of your questions, as many as I can get to, next Sunday. All right, everybody. I will see you next Sunday, and it's great to be with you here today. And you've been a great audience. We've had a great turnout, and I'll see you next Sunday, okay? Great.